Well, welcome to the third part of this series, which is all about, there we go, when divorce feels like too much. Um, so it's been a three-part series for divorcing mums, and today I'd love to share kind of the calm first method that I use when I'm helping divorcing mums in my community, so that you stop feel like you're constantly living in reaction mode. Because it isn't just that one message or one bad day. Um, and it's not just about having a reset every now and again. It's about learning how to move through the whole process with a lot more steadiness, and clarity and feeling dignified. You've made the next steps because you've chosen to, not because you feel like you're being pushed around. Because the opportunity is that it's possible to feel like you're stepping off this roller coaster. Sometimes it can feel like you're that little ping pong ball in the machine and you're just having to bounce off what everybody else wants you to do. But the reality is, it's possible to slow down enough that you feel calmer. And this filters up to the brain and it also filters out to your kids so they can borrow this same calmer, slowed down energy as you all navigate this really tricky time. So, because a lot of what I do is around kind of being in your body and breathing, I wanted to just take a moment now to fully give yourself permission to be here today. So, if you'll indulge me, just take a moment to feel your feet on the floor. If you feel comfortable to close your eyes, go ahead and do that. And just take a few grounding deep breaths down into your belly. And as you exhale, let your shoulders drop, soften the sides of the jaw, and just be in your body. Feel each of the points you're in contact with the ground. Big breath into belly. Exhaling, softening the shoulders, giving yourself permission to be here today. Letting your body know that in this moment right now, you don't need to do anything else. You can be here. In this moment, you are safe. You're in this space, wherever you are today. And it's safe for you to slow down. And then just feeling your feet on the floor. You might want to rub your hands together or rub your arms with your hands, just signaling to the body that you're okay. We're going to get through this. It's okay. So, the reason I have created this Calm First support is because I've lived exactly what you're going through right now. I was constantly being triggered every time I even saw a message arrive, either from my solicitor, my email, from my ex-partner. I would feel that panicky, unsafe feeling rising. And I just knew there had to be a better way because you can't live like that. It's so bad for the body. And I was starting to feel like it all over, hurting all over. And so my work sits in this space between, you're getting advice, legal advice, financial advice. Some of you may be getting therapy as well, but it's that how do we make it meet in the middle and actually get through this? It's those real life moments before you send a reply, before you agree to something that you perhaps regret later, before you send a really emotional essay, just trying to get your point of view across. The moment your kids walk in and you're still carrying all of the panic and the anger and the arguments in your body, like this is where this work really lives. And I'm not here to give legal advice, but what I do is help you feel steady enough and safe enough and clear in your mind so that you can choose the next step from strength and from dignity. And rather than panicking, doing stuff because you've chosen to do it. So, first of all, just a massive thank you to everyone who has been in touch. Loads of people have been through parts 1 and 2, and they've been sending feedback on what's landed. And I really appreciate hearing from you because obviously sometimes you can do stuff in the internet and then not hear anything. So knowing that it's landing and um, hearing what you're really struggling with is really helpful. And one lady said, slowing down is the key. And it's just so true. All of this doesn't need to be dictated by anybody else. And you have got time in order to slow it down to make sure you're doing what's right for you. And I know that this work is tender, like we're dealing with really layers of years and years of programming and trying to work out who we are now, what's happening next, our identity. It's all mixed up in this stuff. So even watching some of the first 2 parts may have brought things up for you. So if you're here and you're still listening and you're trying to understand yourself rather than shaming yourself for all the feelings that are coming up, I want you to know that really matters. Like, this is where it all starts. So, in case you missed the first 2 parts, it's absolutely fine. You don't need to have seen it to get something from today. But in part 1, what we covered was why one message can actually ruin your day, like what actually is going on behind the scenes. And I shared what to do in those first 10 minutes after a trigger has landed. And essentially, it's because your body feels like you're under threat. So it immediately goes into panic. And then that stops you from being able to fully think with all of your brain. So the first move isn't to try and force yourself into thinking better and, adding more information. What you actually need to do is the steadying, is the breathing and coming back into the body just to let it know you're not being chased by a tiger. Like in this moment, you are safe. And then in part 2, we looked at what happens when the spike, that initial reaction becomes a spiral where you're ruminating, you can't settle, and you're rereading the message perhaps, or rehearsing what you're going to say back, or over explaining in long emails, losing sleep. And then before you know it, you've lost not only the day, potentially some of your, the sleep that night. And for me, I certainly experienced it where I could lose the whole week to worrying about one trigger. And so this is where we contain it and allow the body to settle by saying, I'm not giving the trigger the rest of the today. And then today we're looking at kind of the bigger zoomed out version of this, because obviously divorce doesn't give you one trigger at a time. Sadly, it's layered. So what you get is kind of repeated trigger zones. And it might be ex contact for you. It might be handovers. It might be the legal side or money worries. It could be to do with parenting guilt and your own identity. It could be all of them at different times. But what we need to do is create a repeatable way to meet those moments so that you don't keep getting pulled back into that urgency, panic, shut down, people pleasing state. It's exhausting. And what I really want to get across is that there's nothing wrong with you. This is one of the most I think on the NHS list of the most stressful things in your life, getting divorced is right up there, alongside moving house, which many of us are doing at the same time as getting divorced. So this is stressful. And the problem is not that you're too emotional. The problem is that divorce keeps asking you to make decisions whilst you're triggered, to respond to pressure, to support your children when you don't even feel safe yourself, to manage conflict, to hold your life together while your body just is not okay. It feels overloaded and you're exhausted from constantly trying to keep up. And often, what we try and do when we feel like this is look for more information, try and get more advice. And when you pile that on top of a body that doesn't feel safe, you just get massive overwhelm. And so, actually, in those moments, what we want to do is just come back to ourselves. No more information, thank you very much. I need to help my body settle before I can do anything else. And so that is where that mechanism of steady, settled choose really comes into its own. So I just take the card here. The steady bit is what we covered in part one. It's that interrupting the panic. And we do this by stopping and literally noticing, naming what's happening inside of us. This feels urgent, but I don't need to respond from panic. And we breathe and we ground. Just when you feel yourself, like it's almost like you're floating out of your body, you need to bring it all back in. No more information, thank you. Just come back to yourself. And then when we're doing this settling, this is about giving yourself space to process what's happening instead of feeding the spiral. Because every time you go back into the message or retelling the story, you're basically putting your body back into that feeling of threat. So we say in that moment, we have a boundary around your attention and we're not going to keep going back into the trigger. And then next you choose choosing the next clear step once you feel settled, not when you're still feeling panicked. Because panic creates that false urgency. This needs to be settled right now. No, it doesn't. Divorce takes quite a long time. So the best thing you can do is protect yourself. The best way to protect yourself in your future is to slow right down and work off your own urgency, no one else's. And the power of this is, people might say to you, oh, you just need to calm down. And that is not what I'm saying here at all. But the power, it is almost like a superpower. You see calm people around you and you're like, what is their secret? But it's when you feel calmer, you make decisions with the whole of your brain. That is basically it. So when we practice coming back to this state again and again, you stop seeing yourself as someone who is going to be knocked about like that pinball inside the machine. And you're actually the person who can pause and create space for yourself. You can feel all of the things you feel, absolutely, but you don't have to give the one trigger all of your attention, all of your day, all of the evening. You can read a legal email and go, okay, this is a lot. I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. You can support your kids without abandoning yourself. And really demonstrating to them what it means to show up for yourself because they see you doing it for yourself. Not perfectly, not every single time, but trying. Like, that's what I always say to my kids. I'm like, I don't care what the result is. I just care that you try. And that's where the change lies. Not I never get triggered, but I am trying over and over again to come back to myself and to help myself feel safe in this. And then underneath this, so this is where we have the the trigger zones that I mentioned. There are kind of four main areas that I see this. And once you can understand these trigger zones, it suddenly starts to feel easier. So I'll talk you through them. I call it the four M's. And we have mastering emotions. And when I say this, I'm not talking about squashing things into a box and being like, I am your dictator. This is where we work with everything you're feeling. So if you feel panic, noticing it, feeling it, if you're feeling grief or rage or heartbreak or dread or overwhelm, we don't pretend that you don't feel them and actually make space to feel them. And in order to do, sorry, and then once you've done that, it then stops these emotions sabotaging in the background. So a lot of people will tell you just to kind of get on with it, don't worry about it, just be calmer, don't be sad. And it's like, well, no, this is awful. What I'm going through is very, very difficult. So I highly encourage you to feel these things instead of trying to push them to one side and keep just going through all the motions. The second bit is about mindset. So this is where our self-esteem lives. I don't know about you, but when I split up with my ex, I was like, I don't even know who I am. I've literally no idea. I'd put all of my self-esteem on being his wife. Like I thought that was the best thing about me. So I've had to do so much work around understanding that that was probably the worst thing about me. So all of these things where we're saying things like, I should be coping better, or I can't trust my own decisions, or I'm not enough. These, you'll have your own version of them, but these old beliefs are the things that keep us stuck, and they're not true. So being able to work through these beliefs will, it's almost like a key to unlocking getting through this in a way that feels so much more dignified and true to you. The motherhood piece is particularly potent, especially, I wouldn't, well, I work with people from, who've got adult children down to babies, and some people who don't even have children. And it doesn't matter whether you have them or not, motherhood is still one of the biggest shame triggers. It affects your identity, your self-worth, and it's all very much tied into processing divorce. When you go from like maybe it's not having them as much, that kind of thing. So when you start to really understand your identity and your worth is not tied to whether you're a mother or not, whether you're a divorced mother, a single mother, a co-parent, that starts to remove some of the shame that can really show up in divorce. And then also being able to hold space for yourself as well as your children. So you're not just the shock, the emotional shock absorber for everybody else. And when we do this, then creating steadiness at home is so much easier. Being able to repair with your children after really hard moments is so much easier. And you stop measuring your entire worth as a mother, against one bad day. And then the next trigger is probably, I don't know, it's up there with motherhood, definitely, but very universal. And it's this whole thing around money. We've all got old money stories that we don't even know we have. And this is where calm first support really comes into its own, because the financial fears, the catastrophizing, the overwhelm related to, the legal system, different forms that you've got to fill in, the decisions you've got to make, every single one of those is triggering. And so learning how to steady, settle, choose, and slow everything down is massive. As I say, it's not about the financial advice or the legal advice as such, but it's feeling steady enough so that you can use all the advice that you're getting. Like that is the bigger method. And then mapping it into these like trigger zones is so helpful because you start to notice where your real issue is. And sometimes they map on top of each other. So there's a definite link between motherhood and money and stories that we make up about ourselves because, especially for stay-at-home mums, you might be feeling certain things around how much money is yours. And it's very, very messy. But once you can get through those things, then it suddenly becomes so much clearer. And the key, of course, with this kind of thing is repetition and practice. So having the quick tools that we shared in part 1 and 2 is incredibly powerful. And I definitely want you to use that 10-minute reset whenever you're feeling the triggers come up and to keep creating that boundary around allowing your body to settle by saying, I'm not giving this trigger the rest of my day. But those tools on their own can't create lasting change because when the triggers start layering on top of each other and divorce gets really loud, that's when it's so easy to slip back into that feeling of urgency. You get pushed to the point where you're like, oh God, I don't want to get told off. I don't want to do this wrong. And you start spiraling again and over explaining or shutting down and asking for everybody else for their opinion when really it's in here. It's that slowing down and connecting back to your own intuition that's the key. And we don't go back into those old patterns because we're failing. It's because this is learning a whole new way to live. We've been programmed from birth to behave in a certain way. And now we're saying, no, I don't want to be like that anymore. I don't actually need to be. And so it's like building a muscle through practice, through repetition, through noticing. A friend of mine says every time you notice, you have to do a little celebration, like a ticker tape coming down, like, oh my God, I noticed. This is when the pattern starts to break. And you don't build steadiness by understanding it once, you build it through returning again and again and understanding that the reason I need to do this is so that I can think straight without feeling that constant panicky feeling. And incidentally, every time we do it with the right support, that's how self-esteem and confidence and belief in ourselves builds too. And I know that you might be thinking like, God, I haven't got time for this. Like I've got enough going on without being sitting and breathing all the time. And I get it completely. I resisted this for so long. But this is built for real life. It's not adding a whole load of homework to an already really busy, stressful week. Sometimes it's enough to just notice and take a breath, to notice and say, right, that trigger is going in a box. I will look at it tomorrow once I have rested, once I've fed my children and looked after my own body. Every time you reply to only the thing that needs to be replied to, you're practicing it. Every time you're not trying to make decisions at 10 p.m., you're practicing it. And some of you may have really complicated situations with all sorts of financial things going on. And yes, you need the legal advice and the financial advice. But if you're not calm enough to hear it, it's going to be a very stressful process. So allowing your body to settle, taking your own time, that's the sweet spot. And you may find that your ex is being particularly troublesome at the moment. I don't know of many exes who aren't as we're going through divorce. And their behavior may be the problem, but it's kind of like impossible almost to change them. So what we need is a way to manage it in your own body. So this work is about what becomes possible when your ex is doing what they do and you don't abandon yourself in those moments. You stay with yourself. You don't panic. You notice that panic is rising. You feel told off. You feel ashamed. And you sit and breathe with it and you hold yourself. And the little part of you that's sad, that's where we practice it. And a quick note on support, because, don't want to go through this on our own. And in fact, it's very hard to go through it on your own and to be your own steady guide all the time because you're tired, because you're being triggered, because you have your children to also support and hold, because you're making these decisions all the time and dealing with messages and emails, and you get it, you're living it right now. But the main thing is that it's very hard when you're piled under all this stuff to be compassionate and kind to yourself. And it took me years to even understand what that meant. And it's the bit where you actually look after yourself and just stop calling yourself, I don't know, all the names that we call ourselves. Like creating space so that the bits of you that are sad and grieving, even if you are the gladdest person on the planet that this is happening, there's a chance that there's a bit of you that's still going, was it meant to be like this? These parts need space to breathe. That's where mastering emotions really comes in, because you are giving space and a voice to those bits of you that have been silenced probably your whole life because you were told not to show off or not to be too loud or not to be too much. We create space now for ourselves to do that. And if you are struggling to be compassionate to yourself, you can borrow it from the people around you. So we can call in really great support that is safe, that doesn't want to escalate our arguments and perpetuate the drama. We've all got friends who are like gleefully waiting for the next update. And it needs to be steady. Somewhere where you don't have to keep explaining the backstory and then dragging your own body back into the drama, the arena where it doesn't feel safe. You need to get your body out of that. You need somewhere safe where you can practice steady, settled choose. Somewhere where you can take your next step from steadiness rather than because you feel ashamed, because somebody has said something that's made you feel bad about yourself. So you keep coming back to yourself and staying with yourself, even though these things are coming up. I've been doing this work for probably 5 years now, and like especially over the last year, I'm hearing again and again how important this stuff is. So women aren't trying to be perfect; they're just trying to get through this in a way where they feel steadier, clearer, less alone, inside of something that can feel so completely overwhelming. And I was speaking to Laura, who's been on one of my programs in the last year, and she was one of those women, myself also was one of those women, where I'd write a very long email back, trying to get across all of my points of view and what they need to understand. It's just exhausting. And so when I interviewed Laura a few weeks ago, she was like, I can't remember the last time I sent an essay. I'm like, God, that's amazing. And she said this before, I felt totally anchorless, in total panic by myself with no map. And now I've got the physical evidence in my emotions and in my body that calm is protection. I love that because that is what this is about. So when all of the pieces are fitting beautifully together, you've got the repetition, you've got the practice, you've got the right support around you. That's when you can really feel it. So a message may come, and yes, you may still feel triggered by it. But instead of disappearing into panic or attacking yourself for a message you've received, you notice and you say, okay, my body's reacting. And that's when you do the steady. You create the boundary around your time so that you can settle. So you say, I'm not giving this any more attention until tomorrow or until I feel steadier in myself, and then choose what to do next. So you definitely don't reply from that first spike. They don't deserve that energy. You don't give it your whole evening, and you don't take it to bed. And another trigger may be layered on top of that. Perhaps in the background, you've got a legal email that's lingering, or a hard moment that you've just had with your child, and you're feeling the guilt of all that. But instead of beating yourself up and, going back into that mindset stuff of why am I like this or what's wrong with me, you recognize that again, you've been triggered. And you're like, okay, I know what to do first. This is when I return to myself. I'm breathing. I'm coming back. I'm not going to abandon myself in the middle of this. So, not trying to control the whole divorce, not trying to control your ex or every outcome, because that is exhausting. And I always say divorce is kind of learning how to sit in transition and not really knowing how it's going to go, but holding yourself steady in it anyway. And the key thing, I believe, is holding yourself with so much compassion for everything you're going through. And just keeping reminding yourself this isn't normal. This is one of the most stressful things you could ever go through. And so I'm not going to abandon myself. Okay, so I'm very grateful that you have come to this. I'm grateful for everybody who sent me their comments from parts 1 and 2, because I've been able to see that you're doing the work and you're getting in touch. And some of you may even want more. And if this is you, keep your eyes out for my next email, where I'll show you how to do this. You'll need to act quickly because this is only open for a few days and I am limiting the numbers because obviously, as I've said, it's all about creating the right space and the right support. But for now, if you don't take anything else but this with you, I want you to remember that compassion piece. You're not weak because divorce keeps triggering you. Like it is so triggering, all of these bits. And you're not failing because you have emotions. Like, please feel them. Please let that part of you that is struggling know that it's safe to feel what you're feeling and to keep holding yourself in that and to keep returning. Like, you're learning now how to come back to yourself in one of the hardest seasons of your life. And you don't have to do that alone. You can call in all the support that you need. And then remember that method, the steady, settle, choose. Don't do any choosing until you've settled, because that's where we begin. And I want you to know that I know you've got this. And if you need me, I'm here and I've got you too.